Let's talk about colors and gradients. So let's start by defining what a gradient is. So a gradient is what you see right here in this box. A gradient is a blend between colors. We have a starting color and an ending color at minimum. We can have many additional colors within this area. So at minimum of 2 or more colors. And we use it to fill an object or to fill multiple objects. So I'm going to bring up the gradient panel. If you remember the icons here, I have the gradient panel here. If you don't remember, go under Window and go to Gradient. All right, and I'm going to pull this off of the dock. Let's just do a little bit of rearranging here so that you can see the gradient tool, or I'm sorry, the gradient panel. So our gradient panel allows us to choose different types of gradients. For instance, if I click this once again, the gradient in this box is white to black in a linear fashion. That's our first type of gradient, is linear. I also can choose a radial gradient, and a radial gradient would radiate from the middle, like a series of circles coming out. So the starting color is in the center and it radiates out. It's a little bit harder to see in a rectangular object. So linear and radial, 2 different types. Then I also have in my gradient panel my color stops. So down here on the gradient slider, this is, some people call it a ramp, a color ramp. So I have a starting color and I have an ending color. And like I said, 2 or more, minimum 2. I have to have a start and I have to have an end. I also have a diamond, which indicates the midpoint. So the midpoint is where the 2 colors meet with equal amounts. The midpoint does not have to be in the middle. And you can see as I change my gradient on the ramp in the gradient panel, it updates in the box over here. So you can see as I drag this more to the left, I lose a lot of the light and a lot more dark carries through, whereas if I move it to the right, it's the midpoint. So right under that diamond is where it's a 50-50 blend. And I can choose to type in my specific location as far as a percentage on my ramp right here. All right, let's go back to the color stops. So I have options of changing these color stops, and to do that I can double click. When I double click, it brings up sort of this modified color option. I get both my swatches and I have an option also to change with color. So I'm working simple black and white right now, but let's just change this color to, say, yellow. Okay, so then I get a CMYK slider here when I go into my colors. This is related to the color panel. And I can slide, remember, cyan, magenta, yellow, and key is black. So I can choose to mix my own color, or I can use a color that's in swatches. All right, so that was just double clicking. I can also do click on my actual swatches. If I open up my swatches here, let's put this back away and organize this a bit so we can see everything. And this tends to be the way that I do it more. I actually click a color from my swatches and I will drag it down to the gradient. Okay. I also can click on the swatch here and I can bring up some color picker. There we go. Double clicking right there. And I can bring up a color picker as well to choose a color, and that will change. So this is my gradient. This is the fill color really that I'm getting this from. Not such a bright color right now. There we go. Right? So that's how we can mix. Now, if I took the time to mix a new gradient, I might want to use that gradient in the future, so I'm going to want to save it. Easiest way, take that gradient swatch that's in the gradient panel and just drag it over top to my swatches. You can see that I get a orange outline, let go, and there it is. If I double click, I can choose to name it. Green, I'll be very creative. Green to black. Okay, so now when I drag over with my mouse, that name will appear. So I can you know, choose to name it in whatever descriptive way I wish. So that's how you can mix using the gradient panel. Now, how do we apply a gradient? So when I click on, say, this box, right now it has a fill of white, a stroke of black, and it's a fill. So it's hard to apply. The easy way to start is to go and just apply the generic gradient, because I can go to my gradient tool, but nothing's going to happen here because it thinks it wants a solid color fill. So back to my selection tool, I can choose a default. We're given a few default gradients in swatches. And by the way, swatches, we have lots of options that we can append more, either color or swatches, or gradients or patterns here. But this is the one I just saved. So I can start as a starting point and then go ahead into my gradient panel and tweak it. Okay, that's how most people will apply. Once I have a gradient, so let's just take a look at these different. So this is linear. Let's go here and let's apply that same gradient. It was one that was saved called Fading Sky. And now let's change this from linear to radial. There we go. So now you can see the difference. I do have a black stroke on these containers so you can see the edges, I guess. So now with a gradient applied, I can customize this. While it's selected, it's highlighted, I can choose to put a different color in here by clicking and dragging over top of a stop. And this one actually has a, let's just do a, okay, so it has some different things happening here. One of the things that also is happening, you can see that I'm starting to see a little checkerboard in this area of the ramp. If you notice, it looked a little bit different. This stop has a little bit of an extension on it. It's telling me that I have an opacity setting. So opacity is the amount, you know, that how much is there. So this is 100% opacity, meaning it's 100% there, 0% transparent. This stop has a 0% opacity, meaning that it's 100% transparent. So I can change this. Let's just do a 50, and you can see now I have 50% there. So there's a 50% transparency. Opacity and transparency are opposites. If I wanted to, I can click and I can add in more stops. And what's happening when I just click is it's taking the color that happens to be right there in that mix, and that's what it's doing initially. So I can do something extreme here and drag this pink, make this have an 100% opacity, and now I have another color. If I've took too many colors, I have too many stops, click and just drag down, and they are gone. So then I can, you know, customize this a bit, and you can see exactly what's happening over on my example. All right, so now let's go to this circle. So this has a radial gradient. Now we have a tool, it's called the gradient tool, and between that and the gradient panel, I can do some changes. Now my gradient tool is right here in the tool bar. See where I'm at. Once I click on that gradient tool, what happens is I get an editor, so to speak, out here. And this allows me to customize this a bit. It allows me to change direction, change what's happening. And I'll show you here. By clicking and dragging, I can make a whole new type of gradient or look to my gradient. And we'll talk more about this in a little bit. All right, so remember that there are two types of gradients, and always be careful. I just about went here to change and show you. When you do that, whatever is selected does change. So if you want to just explore for a little bit, don't have anything selected. Okay, so I can choose to customize and make my own type of a gradient first, save it into swatches, and then start applying it. It's a safe way that you don't accidentally overwrite or change what already is out on your artboard.